I'm only 26 years old, so I'm not too far removed from where you guys are right now. I'm a licensed attorney, and these issues matter to me, so I think they should matter to you. It is a lot of public policy. It is a lot of high-level issues, but when you get down into the nitty-gritty of it all, which is what you're about to do, you'll understand that it really does affect your daily lives. So I'm going to show you a few charts. The first few are basically going to be pictures of everything we've been talking about this morning, and then we're going to go into the nuts and bolts of the exercise itself. And I'm going to go through it relatively quickly so it's not overkill. Did that chart change? So do we have a giant graph with a huge red portion going straight up? Okay. So this is our fundamental fiscal challenge. Our nation is building up debt at an unsustainable rate. It's actually at a percentage of GDP at its highest point since the World War II era. And the reason why this matters is because, A, we have incredibly high interest payments to go with it. It lowers our ability to save as a nation. It even limits our ability to respond to unforeseen fiscal and economic challenges. And most importantly to me, it saddles the upcoming generations with a lower standard of living. All right, did that one change? All right, so this should be a picture, a snapshot of the fiscal year 2013 federal budget. So this sort of breaks down where we brought in revenue, where we spent our money. The most important number for me that I want you to look at is the big red one at the top where it says deficit $680 billion. And as mentioned before by the panel, this is really just the mathematical difference between what we spend and what we bring in as a nation. And this is what you're working to reduce in the budget exercise. In the budget exercise, you're going to be focused on reducing our budget deficits on a yearly basis for the next 10 years. So do we have like 4 pie charts now? Fantastic. I also like this because then you're responding to me and I know you're listening. So you might wonder what's driving the cost, what's pushing up the deficits. A lot of things, one of them being the shift in our federal budget towards mandatory spending taking up a larger piece of the pie. And over the years, mandatory spending, which is not part of our annual appropriations process, which is comprised of mostly Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, has begun to squeeze out our ability to do annual appropriations on a yearly basis. So discretionary spending, which is part of that annual appropriations process, is a smaller and smaller piece of the pie, and you can pretty much split up that 1/3 in half for defense and domestic investment. So what really happens is just we have now a very inflexible budget. Next chart should be 2 trend lines. Fantastic. So this just shows how much we spend and how much we bring in terms of revenue on a yearly basis as a percentage of GDP. And the most important piece of this is not only the projection beyond that dotted vertical line, but the deficit, which is the gap between those 2 lines. We, on average, run a 3 to 4% budget deficit. We had a few years of surplus and a balanced budget, but those are long gone and far and few between. We have had a migration back toward normal. After the recession, we had a huge gap because we spent a ton of money to try and boost the economy and we lowered taxes. Naturally, as the economy recovers, that gap is starting to close. The issue is beyond next year, because of the structural issues in our federal budget, that deficit is going to begin to widen again and not actually return to its normal level. So that's the problem, the issue we're facing. And just to belabor the point, you should see the sources of growth in federal spending on this chart. All right. So there are pretty much 4 primary areas over the next 25 years that we're going to see a huge jump in spending. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and the biggest bar on there, interest on our debt. All other spending is expected to decrease. All of it. These are like the 4 huge drivers in spending costs for us. The reason interest is going to jump so much is because right now we have incredibly low interest rates that are below their average. And as the economy recovers, those rates go up, we pay more. And interest on $17 trillion is quite a bit. So That's why we're here today. Figure out a way to reduce the deficit, give you a hands-on experience with that and a feel for what it's like to be in Congress and have to make the hard decisions and have to compromise because right now our existing policy is not doing the job. So in groups, you're going to review, you have on your tables lots of paper. So you have a workbook and an options book, and you're going to decide on what policies you're going to implement and whether you're going to increase or decrease the budget deficit over the next 10 years. And just to, as a sort of a side note, there are about 40 policy options. This is just a sample size of all the options that you'd have to deal with if you were in Congress, but we would be here all day if I gave you everything. So the 4 primary topics you're going to deal with, and this should be the categories slide. You're going to deal with discretionary spending, military spending, healthcare and Social Security, and then taxes and revenues. Those are the 4 primary topics that you will deal with and review in the exercise. So let's talk about the nuts and bolts of the exercise itself. Hold up your workbook if you have it. Just show it to me, make sure everyone's got one. Awesome. Now you also should have an options book on your table. It's the much thicker one. I think it has a highlighted title. Everyone at a table, can you just show me that? Make sure everyone has one of those. Okay. So that's what we're using for the exercise. So let's take a look at the workbook. It's the smaller, it's the one that everyone should have. There are 4 what amount to columns on each page once you get past the first few. On the left, far left side, far left column, you have a number for each policy option. That number corresponds with the options book. So, and bear with me for the next few minutes, this is going to get a little in the weeds. So each number in that left column corresponds with an option in the options book. Then you have a brief title of the policy options, so it's helpful in terms of referencing the options book. The next column you'll see positive and negative numbers. That is the mathematical effect of the policy option on the budget over the next 10 years, and it's in billions of dollars. Are we on the right slide? Yeah. Okay. So take, for instance, policy 1, say you agree with it, you vote for it as a group, you increase the deficit by 68, that's $1 billion. My recommendation on that far right column, instead of putting yes or no, write in the positive or negative number, because it's going to be easier to add up as you go along instead of having to figure it out with the yes and tying it to the number. If you vote no, simply put a 0 in that column. So that way you know you're not skipping anything, you don't have to try and match things up, you just have one column of positive and negative numbers, because at the very end, you're going to add up everything, and that's going to be how much you either increase or decrease the budget deficit over 10 years. 2 other things. There are a couple options in the workbook that are either or. So option number 11, if you vote for 11A, you can't do 11B and vice versa. Option 30 does something similar. If I believe you vote for option 30, you skip a few options. So that's all described in there. I just wanted to point that out and make you aware of it. The bigger book, the options book, gives you a brief description of each policy option, and then it gives you a list of pros and cons. So if there's a particular policy option that you're just unfamiliar with, you don't know much about, this is a quick reference guide. So if the group as a whole doesn't understand it, it might be helpful that you discuss it momentarily, but that will be your reference guide throughout the exercise. I would recommend that each group select sort of a chairperson, someone who's going to keep everyone on task going throughout the exercise, and then also elect a secretary, someone who's going to keep track of all the numbers. So someone who's going to write down in each column and who's going to add it up or subtract along the way. So you need those 2 positions to help get you through the exercise. So if you want to go ahead and do that, by all means.
Okay, 17 saying cancel the Army's new ground combat vehicle program.
No.
No, that's not a good idea.
No.
Keep the Army together.
Yeah. Okay, reduce the number of nuclear-armed ballistic missile submarines.
No.
If my memory's right, we have 12 nuclear subs in our base. And one of the proposals was is we eliminate one a year through a period of time. So in 12 years, we'd be down to no nuclear subs. I personally would feel naked if we didn't have the nuclear subs as our last line of protection.
But do we have, do we have the technology to not use the subs?
The other side of the coin is if you're going to expand this spending, then you really have to cut those entitlements, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. So that's the part of the trade-off.
But wouldn't you have to increase, if you cut this, you're going to have more people out of jobs. So then you're going to have to pay them the unemployment. Anyways.
These are the tough, hard choices.
There are so many veterans on the streets right now. There really doesn't need to be any more. And they do deserve pay for what they've done. Yeah, zero.
The pay is overall a lot lower.
Yeah, they have other benefits from it, but they have other expenditures as well.
In my beliefs, they should get a high pay. I think that people who risk their lives, like even firefighters or police officers, law enforcement, should get higher pay because they're the ones who are actually doing the hardest jobs.
Yeah, the most dangerous.
The hardest.
So we're still paying for some of their insurance, but we're just not paying for all of it. Adding a pre-K program is not going to do anything except for teach kids their primary colors, which they're going to relearn in kindergarten and first grade again. All right?
Pre-K is a wonderful program. I would not want to eliminate it, but this this makes it universal, which seems to me is a tremendous added cost that is unnecessary.
If a person retires, shouldn't someone take their spot because they're no longer working there?
Allow discretionary spending to grow with inflation. Okay. No, I get that. So we say yes. Now we're in a boat of, okay, but now we're adding that much more to the deficit still, so we've got to turn around and find cuts somewhere else.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I said we should vote right now. I vote no.
I vote no.
Just hack 30 billion off.
I did want to say one thing as we sit here and we talk about this incredible amount of knowledge that we've had thrown at us, if you will, this morning to listen to, and that one of the reasons that Senator Graham and I got involved in the civics thing is if you don't know the rules, you can't play. Let me say that again. If you don't know the rules, you just cannot play. If you play basketball and you think it's with 3 people, you're never going to win. And we're sitting here talking about some really important issues, and I'm saying to myself, wow, 42% of the people in Florida don't know the 3 branches of government. 44% of the people in Florida can't explain separation of powers. 73% of our 4th graders in a test with the Constitution on it, they weren't able to pick out the Constitution as our leading legal document. We would flunk the test to become a citizenship. Close to 50% of the people couldn't pass the citizenship test. So as we look at all these major issues you're going to do and what you're going to approach and how we're going to approach it, don't forget where the basis is, because if you don't know the rules, you can't play. And trying to educate 1.3 million students in Florida to understand the rules is still our prime goal. And we appreciate your attention, but I didn't want to go without letting you know how important I think it is that we look at the whole picture, just not one part of it.